Welcome. I'm talking with Dr Matthew Clarke from the University of New South Wales, in particular about his paper, The Sublime Objects of Education Policy, Quality, Equity and Ideology, but also about his work in general. So thanks for joining us, Matthew.
My pleasure. Thank you. I currently work in the School of Education in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of New South Wales. Before that, I worked in the University of Hong Kong, and before that in the United Arab Emirates and the University of Melbourne. Before that, I studied philosophy and politics as an undergraduate, and those disciplines continue to inform my work. I've also had a number of years teaching in schools in London and in Australia. I guess I might start by saying that in education policy, as it's sort of traditionally understood, the subject of education is known as is seen as a subject of knowledge. In psychoanalytic theory, the subject, the Lacanian subject, for example, is the subject of desire, an unconscious desire. So this sort of leads us to shift from a politics which is focused around achieving the ultimate good, which is what your subject of knowledge sort of leads you towards, to politics that's centered around the repetition of loss and this sort of notion of an unceasing attempt to recover a purportedly lost object. I think psychoanalytic theory also allows us to think about the way economies are organized. Discourses and quality and equity sort of come to mind as examples here, and to think about why particular signifiers, things like choice, best practice, evidence-based policy, why they grip us and are so tenacious. And it helps us think about how they're deployed. These particular discourses and signifiers offers us a phantasmatic consolation, a sort of a phantasmatic harmony, fullness, completeness, which is somehow compensates us for the lost object. And this also allows us to direct blame in particular directions. So we can say that teachers are to blame for the loss of enjoyment that we would otherwise have by being the most competitive economy in the world and coming top in PISA. So this sort of libidinal economy of enjoyment sort of helps to explain the particular satisfaction that media, politicians and general public derive from scapegoating particular populations, be they teachers or asylum seekers. But desire, which, as I mentioned before, is key here, becomes organized around the recovery of this supposed lost object. And the sort of a Lacanian-inspired critical policy analysis, part of that, as I've conceived it in this paper, is identifying particular highly valued, elevated, elusive objects that serve as objects for desire, to which desire becomes attached for those of us concerned with education. And in the paper I'm arguing that quality and equity fulfill this sort of role, becoming sites for investment of desire, sites of enjoyment. And these sublime, phantasmatic objects serve as sort of pivotal hinges around which discourses become organized and they structure sort of other signifiers. They're akin to Laclau-Mousse idea of empty signifiers too, in that they can become filled with a range of particular content, hence their sort of that elusive nature of being hard to sort of actually grasp hold of. But they're also perceived, because they're connected with loss and enjoyment, they're perceived as constantly under threat. So hence you need this sort of constant reinscription of them in policy. Hence we get continued iterations of policies trying to put in place and ensure that we have quality and equity in education. Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you look at, at the history of policy, you can certainly see, you see that terms like quality become so sort of elevated that we don't really they just speak for themselves. We may not be able to pin down exactly what they mean, but they have this aura attached to them, and yet at the same time, there's just many sort of repetitions of policies which are trying to sort of grasp them, make sure they're there in place, and of course these always are insufficient to the task, which provides the incentive to continue the barrage of policy hyperactivism to which we've been subjected. Okay, well, I guess in thinking about that, I'd start from the point that capitalism relies on perpetual dissatisfaction of desire. And so to sort of compensate for that, we have to have ever increasing productivity, ever expanding growth in our economies. We have to introduce more and more new consumer goods onto the marketplace all the time. We have to accumulate more capital and be sort of successful entrepreneurs of ourselves. And these ideas of growth and expansion and accumulation sort of hold out the promise of satisfaction and enjoyment for everybody. The idea isn't that just certain people can have this, it's that anyone can sort of make it, anyone can get satisfaction through buying the particular products which are being advertised out there in the market. And yet, on the other hand, in the past 3 decades, we've seen an increasing disparities in income distribution, growing inequality, sort of shoveling of wealth upwards in the economy, growing sort of inequality in a range of areas. And neoliberalism seeks to divert our attention from this by depoliticizing politics, by separating politics from the economy, by reducing the latter to a sort of technical affair which can be managed by experts who meet at Davos and at the G20 summits, etc. And part of this depoliticization process involves positioning schools and education as a mechanism that can be drawn on to ensure both quality and equity and as keys to sort of societal and individual success. And I think you can see this ideological linkage between the economy and education in the notion of the knowledge economy. That sort of, to me, is a neat bringing together of those two sort of ideas. And so the fantasy here is that improvements in educational quality will lead to increased equity in education. It's sort of education policy's version of trickle-down economics, if you like. And as I point out in the sort of final sections of the paper, within neoliberal education policy, regulative rationality, reason is drawn on to support these totalizing discourses of quality, the idea that we can map knowledge comprehensively through curricula, through teacher standards, that we can obtain an omniscient gaze on the performance of teachers and students through high-stakes testing, through technologies like NAPLAN, PISA. And yet, at the same time, that sort of regulative reason is suspended in relation to equity, and policy tends to bracket out the sort of wider social, political, economic factors, things like the growth in inequality in societies, because that would, to sort of acknowledge those would interfere with this phantasmatic idea that if we can improve educational quality, which is a technical affair, just like managing the economy, that will spill over into increased equity.
Dr. Matthew Clarke, thank you very much.
My pleasure.